All right. So if everyone's gotten themselves a snack so that they could, if you're on the East Coast with us, a little early in some other places, a little late in some other places, let's get going. So should we go on to our first little slide? And I just want to say good morning. My name is Kate Price. I co-lead the marketing and sales platform here with Matt, and we are here today to talk about doing more with less. Matt.
I'm Matt Zucker. I also co-lead the marketing and sales strategy practice at Profit. We focus a lot on go-to-market strategy and how to develop brand and demand marketing and how to design your marketing organization. And there were really two big catalysts for today's session. So we're so lucky to have you. The first one, like why do this, is I think what we all are feeling and knowing is the pressure to be able to do more with less, and being asked or thinking of it on your own that you're ambitious about it too. And some of that is punctuated, we noticed, in a recent Gartner study, actually quoted senior marketers, 75% actually declared that they feel the pressure to do more than less. That was a really, really high number that really reinforced the point. Actually, there was a corollary point that 86% of senior marketers actually didn't like how they worked. So they not only do they want to do more, but they were unhappy with how they actually got things done. So that really, supported our thinking. Plus, for the last year and a half, Profit's been out there kind of advocating brand and demand, a love story, that these two elements, brand marketing and performance marketing or demand marketing, are both critical and related. And we see them more as allies than as foes. So we've been advocates out there ever since we released the research report about doing both and balancing both, integrating both, blending both. And we kind of realized now are we asking people to do twice as much work? And that's kind of unrealistic. So I think do more with less is also about surfacing some tools and some ways about doing both those things, but maybe with less. Like you can achieve both brand and demand goals and that relationship between them without creating, we're not saying create twice as much work.
So I think maybe this is the moment we introduce our panelists. But I just, it's funny, Matt, when you talk about the fact that, maybe we're asking people to do too much. One of the other things I heard recently was that marketers sort of often feel like they're in that movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once. And kind of that idea of that, they seem to be responsible for everything and there's really a lot to get done. Right. So I just thought that was sort of like a kind of fun too. So anyway, I want to say hi to our panelists, who we are incredibly grateful who are joining us today. So if the three of you could just take a moment to introduce yourselves and why does this topic, do more with less, resonate with you in general and right now? Chris,
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon where you are. I'm Chris Rector, Chief Marketing Officer for GAF. We are the world's largest roofing and waterproofing manufacturer in the industrial space. Been with the company a little over 5.5 years. Prior to that was a 20-year veteran of CPG, most of that time with Colgate-Palmolive, half of that time as an expat. But the transition to the industrial space for me has really been fascinating. And coming from the world of CPG, when you're spending 10, 12, 15% of advertising to sales, and then into the industrial space where it's more B2B to C, and the budgets are slimmer, is really a question about how do you drive more value from every business dollar? How do you think about continuous improvement as you build your programs and kind of iterate and try and again drive more of the business with the efforts coming out of our function. And so for me, it hits dead center of home, because it's what we do day in, day out. It's really trying to be a sophisticated world-class marketing organization, with a 2% of sales allocation to marketing. And so it really challenges you to be creative, to be focused, and to really think about what am I trying to accomplish, and how do I do that in the most efficient way. But thank you for having me. Really excited.
Oh, no.
Thanks, Chris.
You're welcome. Lisa, how about you?
Yeah. Hello, everybody. I'm Lisa Bielecki. Thanks to the Profit team for inviting me here today. So I oversee strategic communications and demand generation at Rust-Oleum, which is a house of brands, a lot of different categories of coatings and cleaners in the industrial and mostly consumer space. So you probably would recognize a Stops Rust spray paint can is what we're most known for. We, as a house of brands, we have learned to, or are learning to, focus more on that end user need rather than specific product campaigns, which is allowing us to be more efficient and more thoughtful and have a better understanding of that lifetime value of our end user. So I'm excited to share what we're doing with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And then last but not least, Lee.
Great to be here with all of you today. I'm Lee Huther. I lead the enterprise or corporate marketing team for Trane Technologies. We're a global climate tech company. We're based in the US. Here, our US headquarters are in Davidson, North Carolina. I've been in the brand and marketing world with roles across this company for probably about 18 years. And given my time with the company, I've seen our marketing function really start to play a more strategic role in driving business results. That said, it feels like I'm leaning in on Chris's intro here. We're an industrial company and we always employ agile ways of working, standard work tools and processes, a lot of similar lean concepts that you might hear in the manufacturing space. And it's all with this idea of continuously improving. So sometimes whenever I hear do more with less, I tend to think do better with what you have.
Thank you so much. I think what's fun about kind of having the three of you with us is that sort of you're sitting in this industrial space, and yet actually the way you have to think about your marketing is a little different, right? So Chris, you're managing the overall brand, but there's many kind of services and offers and products that you have underneath that. Lisa, you have a house of brands, and Lee, like, you're kind of managing the corporate brand. And so it's interesting that you are kind of in this similar space, but the way you might come at your marketing challenges is a little different, and hopefully that kind of resonates with our audiences. So I think what we'd like to do, is like talk about these kind of 7 steps that we have been talking about. Matt and I have worked on with our clients to how to think about potentially doing more with less. So we've got these kind of 7 different areas here, and let's kind of just take a little moment and that like lovely little GIF that moves for us, talk a moment about what each of those things might be about. So let's just kind of start with the first one, which is making sure that we're thinking about customer goals. So if we just hop to the first slide. I kind of, as a marketer, I grew up doing kind of situation assessment that was really gave me kind of clear marketing or business goals. That was like, I need to grow my business by X% and I need to drive my market share by Y%. I didn't grow up really focusing on how many customers or consumers do I need to change behavior of in order to deliver against that. And I had like this moment of epiphany when I heard this really, really, really simplest way to think about marketing in the world, which is like, you cannot get growth unless customers and consumers change their behavior. Really straightforward. And what are the 4 kinds of behavior you're trying to do? You're trying to get more customers. You're trying to get current customers to buy more. You're trying to prevent current customers from leaving. And then you're trying to get current customers to kind of buy something different. And just for me, that epiphany of like, wow, that's really just the 4 things. That's it in the ways that I can drive growth. So really focusing all of our activities, any marketing activity should be pointing towards one of these things. And if you can't say that a marketing activity is not pointing towards these 1 things, then maybe you shouldn't do it. Which sort of takes me to the second tool, which is maybe the most obvious thing in the world, but this idea of kind of just do less things. And this is sort of one of my kind of favorite ways to think about the world, like the idea of kind of, there are both doing the right things and doing things right. And on that bottom line is this idea of like the craft of marketing and being really, really great at doing search, being really, really great at how we think about social, being really, really great at building great ads. But interestingly, if you are spending a lot of time really building the craft against the wrong area, then you may as well have taken the day off, right? So instead, like really focusing on, are we actually spending our time doing the right things? Is a great philosophy for life, actually. And, you know, the way I always think about it is actually it's much better to do the right things wrong and then learn how to do those absolutely right than to do the wrong things right. So do fewer things. And that is that kind of, I think, one of the first ways to really think about doing more with less. Matt.
Yeah, Tim. Number 3 is around, and by the way, if anyone has additional ones, please drop them into the Q&A, and you feel free to use that throughout the session too.
And we will definitely then say this was our idea, right?
Yeah, exactly. So number 3 is the funnel is helpful for planning and for making choices, but we've also found it's limiting, and we found this in research as well too. The journey, however, is a little more helpful when you have to make some choices, because it both can, if you do a proper customer journey, you get pre-purchase, post-purchase, and you also can find opportunities that might really, really make a difference. And you could focus in on those. So that's one thing you could do. The second thing is, what we've also found is, even if you've been in marketing a long time, our bias is about certain touch points, that's more of a brand or a demand touch point. We're finding increasingly untrue, that you can use different moments in time and different touch points for both. One might lead a little more, you know, higher up the funnel is like a little more awareness, but you can still, people buy right through the Instagram ad, right? So the idea is that you might find some great ways of doing more with less by using the journey as a canvas and being able to zoom in and do both your brand and demand objectives in the same moment. And it's kind of magical if you start to think about it and use channels that way. So we're wildly optimistic about using the journey as a canvas rather than just the funnel. And the next one is, in some ways, this could be the fastest, is we develop our brand positionings, and then for every audience, we develop really unique value props that really are why buy from us. And a lot of times we drift from the why buy from us. And what we could do is we could probably sharpen them a bit. We could probably update them with some new, more interesting, relevant benefits. We could relevant them with something about an audience tells us matters to them right now, like 6 months from now, rather than a year ago when we originally wrote it. So you could update it from a messaging point of view. Obviously, there's more of a lag if you want to update your value prop with pricing or some other aspect of it. It might take a little more time. But we also think that sharpening your value prop and getting a little closer to a product benefit or a solution benefit, still reinforcing the brand, could be a very powerful way to do a little bit more with less as you go into this new year.
You know, like I think one of the things we've been talking about as well, right, is that making sure they connect together. Sometimes, oddly enough, and I think in that, just as you were saying, on kind of along the leap, is that sometimes actually people think about brand and product separately, but making sure that those things link really tightly together kind of amplifies each. It's got like those little arrows going in both directions there. Which takes us to the next one, which is creative work. I've been talking to a whole bunch of CMOs recently, and it's been really fun because to a T, almost every one of them, I say, what really makes you excited about marketing? And they're like, oh, brands and brilliant creative work and connecting with our consumers and customers. And I think that kind of this one speaks to that a little bit. So I think sometimes in this world of kind of digital and bits and bytes of content and having to have many different assets, sometimes we forget that the power of each little piece of creative work is really important. And I was looking at, at some data the other day. This is brand new data that's reinforcing data that I've seen over time, which is it is still the case that more than half of a campaign's effectiveness is about creativity and the power of the creative. So, we've just got some ideas here in terms of like how you can make your creative work as hard as possible, you know, and for me as a young marketer, having kind of these kinds of rubrics really helped me to be able to actually deliver great creative and have proper conversations around it. So then let's move into the next one, which is very topical. Can you actually have AI be part of your team? How can AI like shorten tasks? How can it kind of help you do something, create something, understand something, or decide something? We know that there are a lot of difficulties around this topic, but in terms of making sure that, you know, we're keeping security, but there are certainly ways, and we've been hearing ways about people kind of having AI be part of their teams.
Great. And then the last one is really around scenario planning, and especially if you're launching a product or you've got something in market that's not doing really well, is to start to game plan out what might you do or what might you change if it's succeeding or not succeeding. And then there's different levers to play with that you can help you make choices, and you're a little bit more prepared to kind of turn on the dime when and if you need to. A lot of folks don't bother to do this, but it can be really worth it. So you're a little more ready for what might happen later on. Okay, so now let's go to our panel and start to ask them about how they're doing more with less. If their head goes to any of those things we just talked about or something else, we'd love to hear some stories from the field. So I don't know who's game to start.
Chris.
Yeah, I can kick off.
Thanks.
And I love the structure of the content, because it really does summarize the journey we've been on at GAF, probably going back to 2018 when I first came onto the business. And it honestly did start with the sharpening of the value proposition. When I first got here, right, the value proposition was we were the biggest, and you know, North America's largest roofing company. And while that may be true, it really didn't inspire great work. It didn't inspire engagement. It didn't inspire focus. And so we went on a journey to really define, like, who are we? And we landed on this brand purpose statement around we protect what matters most. And we then took that and translated it to all of our customers, right? The customers who buy from us, the contractors who install our product, the homeowners and property owners who ultimately consume our product, and even the communities where we do business in, day out. And that led us to partnerships with Good 360 and partnerships with Habitat and Team Rubicon. So it really was, you know, a red thread that you could pull and really see it translate in the creative work and the go-to-market that we then deployed. And from kind of 18 to now, it really has been transforming, you know, how we do marketing, centering on the contractor as our primary customer, prioritizing all the things that we can measure, again, to ensure, you know, that we're seeing the results in the business, focusing on that low funnel conversion. Our category is one of the most highly researched categories I've ever been in. You know, people get a roof once in their lifetime, maybe, and the fear of being ripped off, right, by a contractor is so great, right, that there's just so much due diligence done. And so rather than do a whole bunch of brand awareness advertising, it's really about point of market entry. Like, when are people in the market? You know, what is their journey? How does it start? A Google search of, you know, roofing contractor near me. And that's where we start to insert ourselves, and it's really help us, you know, become very efficient. And then it's, you know, it's analyze, it's iterate, and then, you know, constantly a touchstone for voice of customers. So, you know, when I see the 7 points laid out, you know, it really does capture, you know, the journey we've been on. And just yesterday, it was perfect timing for this call. Just yesterday, we had one of our biggest customers release their annual contractor study. Last time they did it was 2019. And the most recent time, beginning of 23, and we saw double-digit increases in all of the key metrics of brand trust, brand affinity, brand usage, and it all goes back to, you know, following, not quite exactly, but following many of the steps that you outline. And so for us, so we're excited. We think that there's kind of more opportunity out front of us, but it's been done, you know, in an environment where we've been working with less. And doing more. So
wow, congratulations. That's really awesome. And it really, you know, when you and I have been chatting about this, it really struck me that pivot to like really laser focusing in on the contractor as who's most important. And clearly kind of getting those brand results is a key point.
And that's hard to do when you're in a B2B2C, right? Because we sell to distributors who then sell to contractors who then sell to homeowners or building owners, and you're gonna ask, like, who is my customer? And do I advertise to the homeowner and drive demand? Well, not really, if there is no repeat customer and they're gonna choose a contractor before they choose a product. And so you really have to get that contractor to fall in love with you so that they become, the extension of your brand, in the home or kind of in the commercial project. And so that was an eye opener for us, and that really helped us prioritize where we put our money.
Great, thank you. Lisa or Lee?
Yeah, I can jump in. So as someone who works for a 102-year-old brand, it has been a journey for us to think about building our brand, because I think the perception within some of our leadership team has been that our brand is built and it's strong and the DIY awareness is very high, but there are new DIYers entering the category every day. And then when you buy your first home, that's when you really start thinking about these brands. So we've started to, think more about the value of brand driving demand. And I use the analogy, I don't know if it's a good one, but the brand, building your brand is kind of like your core, right? So if you exercise and you want to take care of your body and you go to the gym like 3 times a week, you're building that core. So when you go to the Caribbean on vacation, you don't have to like really go for it to drive demand, right? That you need to work less hard to get to your goal. So as we launch new innovations and new products, because we are building respect and with the end users, they trust our brands. They've had success. We've celebrated those successes with long-term relationships with end users. That investment doesn't have to work as hard for us. And so that's something that we've, changed perception over the last few years here at Rust-Oleum.
Yeah, that's interesting. We also, we found, and I'm sure you have it, that also when you turn off your core, the price of demand goes up. We find it's demand is more efficient with a strong brand in market. And we've seen it, when you turn it off, it's far more expensive too. And you lose share of voice right away and everything becomes more difficult.
Well, I think the challenge for older, more mature companies maybe is that we feel like we've already done that investment. We've made that investment, but we get older and our customer gets younger. And so that needs to be, a continued effort that we make.
Fair. Lee?
I've never heard that analogy of
That's funny.
I like that. Like I'm gonna
you can use it.
Really, yeah. So Lee, you have a brand new brand.
Yeah, well, it is, but it follows this very similar story to Lisa's, right? I was thinking through the topic of today, and Trane Technologies is really a new old brand. So in March of 2020, our company split from our industrial businesses, was a part of Ingersoll Rand. We formed a brand new company, which is called Trane Technologies. And there's a really good part of that, and that we were able to leverage Trane, a global brand that is really well recognized and a leader in the market. And a lot of people recognize Trane and Thermo King. Those are our leading brands. They're both about 100 years old. So what my team does in more of that corporate brand space is focus a lot on building awareness and equity in our new enterprise brand, right? It's a baby. It's only 3 years old. And so it's really interesting to try to make that tie and that connection, because same thing, our brands are getting older and our customers are getting younger, or it's a whole new set of customers, right? It's a different way of selling. And for my team, we're not selling to typical customers. So our most important audiences are actually, one of them is potential employees. So when we think about splitting brand and demand, we have to really do both at the same time. We've got to work on building the longer term, broader brand awareness. We also have to be deploying really localized demand generation campaigns to support recruitment marketing needs for all of our different facilities. And on top of that, we got to really focus on making that brand connection for potential employees with the brands that they might know, right? The Trane and Thermo King brands, they might know them local in their markets, either from a manufacturing perspective, large manufacturing footprints, or as a consumer of the brand, sometimes you're just going down the street and you happen to see a Thermo King unit on a vehicle. So you know those brands, but we've got to make a connection to the employer brand, Trane Technologies. That's who we want to have, you're coming to work for this company. And so a lot of what both Chris and Lisa just said resonates with us. It's not an if, it's more of an and. Then you have to focus on them at the same time and figure out what you're going to spend and where, because one has a longer tail to it than the other one.
And one of the things that you were talking about is that, as you were launching this new brand, and I know it was launched in a moment in time that, we were all changing our behaviors, is that you really needed to kind of do less things and kind of tighten your audiences. So talk about that a little bit, of kind of how you started to do more with less in a moment in time when the world was changing.
Yeah, it's really fun, but not recommended to launch a brand new company. I think we launched, I believe, March 4th, right? And I think everybody went home March 13th, and at least in the US. And so it was a really great, what we had the benefit of having a really great celebration and a really great introduction and a party really to become this brand new brand. But we had to really rethink new ways of introducing it almost immediately. And we're going back to some of that right now too, to really understand who those key core audiences are, right? And I mentioned one of them, potential employees, right? We're all in the same, that changed in the world. I would imagine that Lisa and Chris are going to say the same thing when it comes to production and hourly employees. We all need talent. And so that's a critical audience for all of us. And you have to make the brand resonate there. For a corporate brand as well, it's investors, right? And so I think it was really important for us to dig in and gain some really powerful insights as a new company. We kind of knew what those insights were as an older company and merged with our industrial businesses. But in this new state, what do our audiences think about us? Are they slightly different? Do they act differently? And we really honed in on where we were going to put our marketing efforts and our marketing dollars, and trying to do that with the audiences where we can see the most impact.
It's interesting that how important that those audience insights and getting really close to audience understanding is.
Yeah. Kate, I was just going to mention too, I don't know where it fits in across all of the tools, but it's really actually hard to slow down and stop. So it's not doing less. It was almost another tool that I won't put it in the chat because I don't know how to get over there right now, but another tool of just slowing down for a minute so that you can make sure that you're making the right informed decisions as you're redeveloping or refining your strategy moving forward.
Yeah. And Lisa, I feel like you had done something you have so many products and something with audiences to do more with less.
Yeah, so we have really focused in the recent past in innovation and speed to market, and focusing on that specific product category, but and understanding that user who purchases garage floor coating or a wood stain, separately, and creating individual segmentation studies for each of those products, and are naming those personas and really learning about them, and then realizing that we could be much more efficient if we think about the DIY lifetime and this life stages. So, as you become a DIYer, you're going to start with spray paint. And once you use spray paint and realize how easy it is, you might move on to wood stain or wall paint or cabinet paint. And so realizing that we need a DIY persona across that capability and confidence level allows us not only to be way more efficient. I can name off probably 24 names of personas that we've had over the past few years that are related to products rather than life and human beings. And so we're more efficient with that, but we also know those people a lot better. And we're able to really dig into what motivates them, how they're using media, and celebrating them, and then helping them move on to the next more complicated project. So it's been great. It's a journey, and we're learning how to do it as we go. But to Lee's point, it's really hard to slow down because we're running, and we have said, I don't know how many times I hear this in a week, but we're building the plane while we're flying it, and we're learning and adjusting and pivoting and getting smarter, but we're not slowing down. So yeah, I agree. It's a challenge, but it's wonderful that we're all making the investment in understanding those end users, being smarter about our plans, and agree also with the idea that our talent acquisition is very important across the board for how we communicate our brands, and celebrate those associates too. They recognize the brand, and that's why they want to work there. If your brand awareness isn't as strong, it's a little harder.
So Matt, I feel like we need to add an extra tool on the front, which is like maybe a big stop sign, perhaps, or like a yield sign, something that is like just one of those things of like, pause, take a breath.
It's got to be CEO friendly, though. I don't know if they want to stop. Stop sign might be not so good.
I don't know. Let's think through the right traffic signal. But and then also kind of just this like huge theme of like it's all about the people. Before we go into the next little thing, we have a question from the audience, which says, how are these brand leaders using video to amplify their brands? And why has only Lisa got a logo behind her?
Oh, there you go.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, there comes the pride.
Wearing mine's on my chest, literally. So.
You're wearing it on your heart.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So let's pivot into 2024. This is the season, right? We're all thinking about the year ahead. I know that, Matt and I are just heading into planning as well. So as you think about kind of 2024 planning, how are you thinking about doing more with less? Is it still top of mind? And when we look at some of these tools, which of them are you thinking as kind of another way to manage your way through 2024? Lee, why don't you begin?
Sure. And I'll be brief on this one. So I know it was lengthy on the other, but one of the tools that you all
on time, just so you know.
Okay, good. One of the tools that you all had put up there was all about brilliant creative, and there is no way that I'll remember what that acronym stands for, but brilliant creative will stick with me, and I'd like to use it as a tool to kind of measure our creative. And sometimes it stood out to me because sometimes when we're talking about creative, we're talking about the assets, like the development of the tools. And by the way, we're using video. One of our new ways of using video is to help educate the market. There's a lot out there right now when we talk about terms like decarbonization, energy efficiency, carbon footprint, sustainability. Some of these big terms that we talk about, we don't realize that we talk about them all day, every day. And so one of our kind of mini campaigns that we're running is all about education. And we have a whole series of videos that we're using to simplify some of these more complex frameworks or complex strategies that we talk about within our industry and with our customers a lot. But those assets, they have to be simple and brilliant and creative, but so do the people who are creating them. And I think that that's definitely an area of focus for us in 2024. I think the marketing teams are the most creative teams in the company. And so if we don't give ourselves time to think creatively and give ourselves the space to be creative, we'll just do what we need to do. You just deliver on whatever the ask is. And so I really like that tool, and I'm going to use that with my team and also challenge our agency partners to it as well, because I think it's so simple to just think about the assets, but the people need time. We all need time to think creatively about our different approaches that we're going to take.
Yeah. And, I spent about half my career in brand advertising creative and about half my career in direct marketing creative. And, yes, there's discrete, sometimes it's a pure brand, and sometimes there's discrete, demand, but there's a fair number of the middle, like your educational content, where you can achieve a little bit of both, and you always should probably. And next best action, and sometimes we don't look for opportunities to either connect the dots or to have some pieces work in both ways to some degree. And we know that creative improves performance and effectiveness and sales. So if you believe it, then yes, using this tool and having a look at, is your creative working as hard for you as it could be, would be a good step.
So here's the brilliant tool. So B for branded, R for rooted in the product to drive demand, I for insight-based, which is of course customer-centered, L for leverages culture. Might be a stretch for an L there, but the second L is something you love. Make sure you love your creative. I for inspires action, A for authentic to brand, and I totally cheated here, unique and distinctive, and T for transferable. You have to be able to transfer it across things. But anyway, brilliant. That's what brilliant stands for. We can pull that down now. So Chris, what about you? What are you going to do? You're laughing at me. I can see you now. How about you thinking about 2024?
Yeah, it's actually interesting timing as well here, because I just got my budget targets for next year, and it fortunately is not less, but it's not significantly more. And so that is the constraint, right? The challenge is all about how do you translate, right, the customer goals, right, into marketing actions. And so we're really starting to focus in on, not just a monolith of contractors as the audience, but some real subsegments of that audience that we're going to be hyper focused on. So Latino contractors, as an example, very different from the general market and emerging. I think as the demographics change, insurance, believe it or not, pays for 40% of our industry. And so those contractors who are driven by restoration work is another area of focus. And then the last is this large multi-location contractor that may operate in multiple cities or multiple states and has, again, very different needs from a local type of contractor. So for us, it's taking the money that we have and then reallocating it to really focus in on ways to drive either engagement or conversion with those audiences. And so that's the task, right? It's not so much that the budget's coming down, but we've got to do more against these emerging segments with relatively the same amount of money, that we had last year. And so there's choices and trade-offs and et cetera that go with that. But the sharper we can be on what those goals are, I think the easier it will be, to determine how we spend.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
Go ahead, Matt.
One of my big worries with do more with less always and budget pressure about the same budget as last year is that people stop testing things. They testing new things. And that really scares me. We found in the research we released last year also that people that consider themselves successful marketers use testing as a big piece of their plan. It's not a nice to have, because benchmarks are not good enough anymore. Everything's moving too fast and there's too many changes. So you have to test even just to stay ahead or stay afloat. And I don't know if you all if you all can still build testing into your plan, but I would beg for it because I think it's it's not just nice to have, but I know it's tricky if you're forced to do more with less and you still want to try new things.
Yeah, I think especially when you're dealing with new segments, right? And so rather than take the whole budget for the Latino roofer and deploy it, at once, let's test and iterate, right? Just to make sure that what we're doing is resonating.
Right, you have to learn.
What do we learn along the way so that we can course correct and, maybe, a different platform. Maybe it's, Facebook and Instagram, versus email and organic, right? But we got to figure out what works with that audience, which will be very different from what works for, general market audience.
And we actually have an interesting question coming in from the from the audience about, so it's directly related to that, right? So you're testing new different things, but then if you find something that really works, how are you scaling that up quickly, right? So if you put a plan in that is sort of, like it's committed, how do you then make sure you have the agility and the ability to scale up those things that are really working? I mean, so Lisa, is that something that is on your mind?
Always on our mind. So, the world has changed, right? A lot of times we try to reach that first time homeowner, and a year ago they were 32 years old and now they're 36. In just 1 year, that's shifted. And so we test and learn throughout both the content, the creative content. A lot of video-based content performs better than anything else for us. the room space is informed by what people are searching for, talking about, but everything is so unique to a person's style. And so that person who may engage with one type of kitchen may want a farmhouse kitchen, but somebody else wants an uber modern kitchen or cottage core or whatever that is. So there's a lot of test and learn. We leave an opportunistic budget always to be able to, pivot or add on, hopefully mostly add on, but making sure that we're looking at both the intent numbers is what we call them. So people who are watching, who are engaging with our ads, who are watching our how-to videos, we see that as intent to purchase, but then correlating sales, which we don't sell direct. So that is almost our B2B2C. So correlating sales lift with all of the intent to purchase as well. And yeah, absolutely. You testing in some markets, do some, multi-attribution models and testing new things. We're testing a Spanish language audio for the first time this year. And I'm really excited about that because the pros that, as Chris said, that's an emerging audience or maybe emerged and we haven't been there where we should be. So I think if we don't test, shame on us.
And build, because I do think that localized testing, right? Take 5%, 10% of the budget, run a pilot in Florida, Texas. I'm using the Latino Pro as an example. Learn what you need to learn, and then you've got 90% of the budget left, right, for scale and deploy. Right, but if you go guns blazing, out the gates, nationally, not knowing what works, shame on you. I think there's opportunity in that.
Here we are 10 years into the pandemic and I still can't get off mute. So Lisa, what are your kind of core things in terms of how you're thinking about doing more with less for next year?
We are, so, in the past we focused on a product launch. So we'd focus on one thing and now we're focusing on spaces. So it's a little bit different here, and I think it's similar in a lot of companies where you have platforms internally and they focus on their P&L and the investment, but across multiple platforms is how we have to think about how a homeowner thinks about their space. So they want to feel happy. They want to feel good about the home that they live in. And all they care about is, gosh, is my bathroom ready for holiday guests? Not how can spray paint help me? It's really about how can I feel good about my space? So we're building out these campaigns and testing them. And, the challenge really is, as we're looking at our performance, how do we show the value across multiple product sales? So maybe one product will sell or inspire more purchases than another, but it's still the whole project that drives the interest and, the research that people do. And, we might advertise a red color, but they're buying blue. So it's thinking lower, not lower funnel, but lower what people are most interested in. So leveraging social listening and search terms and really closely understanding what people are talking about. So last spring, we saw people were talking about backyard makeovers and bathroom and kitchen. So we launched those projects, but we'll look at garage projects in February, but we'll always need to be ahead of that. And then the challenge is having the creative ready to go. So if you see something trending, are you able to develop that creative fast enough to hit that trend before it fizzles out? And Barbie was an interesting example this year. I don't know if you guys read the news, but pink paint was selling out in a lot of places. So we have we built a very agile studio team who's able to, shoot content really, really quickly and then execute that as fast as we need. I mean, we have some kitchen sets and some things that might take a little time to build, but that agility and really being focused on the user.
That's great.
So interestingly enough, one of the tools that we talk about is scenario planning. So in that sort of kind of agility world, are you guys kind of using that, kind of thinking through if-then scenarios that are kind of, often I have historically thought about scenario planning as like things that could happen way in the future. Mm-hmm. But how do you think about it in terms of kind of managing the right now?
Yes. So I think building these agile teams has allowed us to, that upfront investment, has allowed us to be more nimble and move more quickly. You know, and some trends never or don't usually change, like Halloween. People love to paint for Halloween. It's great. So we know those things are going to happen in advance, but there are examples. I mean, there's probably a dozen examples of a product that we thought was kind of a sleeper and it might be a great product, but people aren't interested in it. And all of a sudden it takes off. So we're able to work, with different media partners, retail media, to shift spends and, to leverage the creative that we have or the ability to build new creative quickly. But without those teams, without investing in having the space, which is just down the street from us, and probably 25 people who are available, photographers, videographers, we can pull in talent really quickly. We're able to do that. 10 years ago, there's no way. It would have taken, we would have had to brief somebody and, it would take 3 months to get the creative that we needed.
And Lee or Chris, are you agile and ready to go, or do you plan ahead so you're ready to go, or something else?
Yeah, I mean, I think our agility, and I'd love to tap into that team, Lisa, if they have any availability. We don't have a large in-house creative team that's ready to shift. But I think another angle that we could look at is just budget transparency. So within our team, we've built an integrated marketing. Our organization is also part of a communications organization. And so everything that we're doing is kind of together and building an integrated marketing and communications plan. And the ability to sit on the same team and give budget transparency across it's been really helpful in knowing that if we need to shift in some area, and there's a large initiative that's coming up right now. And so our teams are getting together to say, what is it? This takes priority. And if this takes priority, what do we need to deprioritize so that we can make sure that we have the right funding, even though it was planned for something else, that we have the right funding at the right time to make sure that we've got all of the right people and tools and external resources if needed on deck and ready to go to support that initiative.
And we're 100% in-house, and so I've got a full creative team in-house, a full digital team in-house, creative studio on premise, and because our business is so subject to extreme weather events, right? The name of the game is flexibility, right? A hailstorm hits Texas and demand's up 30%, right? You want to be deploying marketing assets into those markets, right, to drive as many leads as possible into the hands of our contractor network. So for us, it really is about agility, flexibility, templating of all of our assets, a style guide, right, that is plug and play, and just making sure that when something happens, right, we show up consistently in look, feel, tone, but then we're able to pivot, based on the event, right? Is it a hail event in Texas? Is it a hurricane in Florida? Is it something else in the Northeast, El Nino, whatever it is? Right, we're flexible enough to adapt to those conditions, but most of it's due to the fact that everything's done in-house, and it's been a true asset to us. Even thinking about the COVID years, right, when contractors couldn't get into homes, how do you digitize the selling experience in a moment's notice, right, to be able to convert all of your analog assets to digital to then show up in the home the same way you would have if you were across the kitchen counter.
I love that kind of reinforcement that actually it's all about the planning that allows you to be agile, right? Like it doesn't happen by accident that you can move quickly. You have to have thought it through ahead of time. Julia, I think we have a slide, no?
So I guess the last question is really let's turn to for our audience, like, we want questions from the audience as well, but we'd love advice from panelists and from people on the phone. What would you tell people to do with do more with less? Is there a tool you would recommend that you saw? We've hit a few of them in this conversation, but we'd love to get more advice from both the audience as well as it. Like, let's all be teachers.
We ask you to pop that in the Q&A rather than in the chat.
Oh yeah, because we'll see in the Q&A.
And while you're doing that, panelists, what advice do you have for our for the people who are listening?
I'll go. I mean, to me, as we started, I think for us, the biggest game changers were, item number 1 and item number 4. And getting away from North America's largest to we protect what matters most, and sharpening that value proposition, and then translating that, to something meaningful for each of your customer segments, whether it's primary or secondary, has been a game changer. And then once you've done that, right now I can look at those customers and clarify the objectives for each of those customers, and then prioritize spend and effort accordingly. But without those two things, we'd be floundering, quite honestly, because we just didn't have a sense of purpose and direction, and didn't know, right, who the customer actually was. And in our case, we have circled the wagons around the contractor as the primary customer.
Yep.
Yeah, I think for us, I think it's just thinking about, any advice that we would share is just really thinking about prioritization as well. It's easier to do it whenever you have those narrowed audiences that you can focus on. But once you prioritize, just remembering that the marketing team isn't just the marketing team. It's we've got stakeholders all around us. And so making sure that they're coming along with you and agree that the priorities are in fact the same. Helps you move a little bit faster. I'd say also just kind of keeping a pulse on team capacity and getting creative with how you resource would be, helpful as you think about heading into 2024.
It's really true, right? Doing more with less is also really about teams, right? And I think that, we've all been through just too much to do over the course of the last couple of years. So making sure that we're looking after our teams by really focusing is actually a really important part of this whole discussion.
And requests come in, right? And you have to answer them. And why aren't we doing something about this? Why aren't we doing something? I remember for content, we created once for a client, kind of an ad hoc prioritization tool where you could quickly triage a request, and you gave it a quick score, and it was set up for the right people to do it, because they knew it was going to happen. They knew and they wanted to be able to say yes, or yes, but here's where it fits in. So we created this prioritization tool. So maybe that could be helpful to help have that conversation rather than just say yes or no and drive everyone crazy.
We have a bunch of people saying they really like that it's better to do the right thing wrong than to do the wrong thing right. So like people are kind of highlighting that. Other advice?
Say, as we're learning more about our users, we've learned that we don't want to be too narrow, and we don't want to make too many assumptions. And in the past year and a half, we found that, we had always targeted, we still will, the first time homeowner, but there are a lot of 20 somethings who are taking on projects and in a very big way. I think they call it stoop diving, and we used to call it dumpster diving when we were younger, but refreshing furniture and really building that brand experience. And without being more open about listening and seeing who's talking about our brand, we could have completely missed that audience.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? It's because there's a lot of, targeting becomes very important in kind of lower funnel and how we think about growth. But then sometimes we get so targeted that actually it's not enough people to be able to deliver against our growth goals, which is why that kind of first tool, right, around kind of really identifying those growth opportunities has to be quantified, because otherwise you'd be like, oh, there's only 10 people that are within that. So let's sort of pop into the next slide, I think. I think we just we want to say thank you. Yeah.
Thanks for folks for tuning in. We were excited that there's interest in this topic. We feel like not enough are talking about it. Everyone else is saying do more, or they're saying do less. People are trying to cut everyone down, and we're more optimistic about like, what if we could do more with less? What would that look like, especially we go into planning for 2024. So we're excited for both the ideas and the suggestions and for the examples.
And then just finally, I think we have just one more slide here, right? Is that, let us know if we can help. Like, we love this subject. We really do. You know, if for example, it would be helpful for us to have a conversation with your teams around kind of just sparking the conversation. How could you how could you do more with less? How can your teams do more with less? You know, can we maybe auditing how well your activity is going right now? Like, is every piece of your marketing mix really being maximized? Also, kind of if you are interested in any kind of 2024 planning workshop. But beyond that, thank you very much for spending your lunch hour, evening hour, breakfast hour with us. We are so thrilled to have our amazing guests. And thank you for those of you who've been participating on the chat. We have been seeing some of that. Other than that, I think that's all we have.
Have a great day.